And when I look at it, basically because it's such a simple scheme of green and brown, you know, rush tones and paint, no big deal. Okay, even with the camera, you're not going to see this. That's about how much oil paint I put down. I don't even know if you guys can even see that. I'm just, the tip of the brush has just got a little bit of green on it. And again, I've got my, sometimes, and I'm just trying to get a ratio of thinner to paint. I'm just trying to work the color in right now just to get some oil paint on the brush. And then I come into my paper towel, I unload it again, as I've mentioned before. So I'm always unloading the brush no matter what chemical I'm using. I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to actually put the oil paint where I want it. I'm not putting random dots down. This is not that process, if you guys are familiar with that. That's an entirely different point of view. And so all I'm doing right now is I've just put, again, I don't even know if the camera will catch that. Let's see. Retarded. It's kind of grainy. It's hard to see. Okay, what I've done is I've put some darker green down in here with the oils, and as I work, I'll work this. I'm going to work just this one section, and I'm going to work one color at a time as I go. And I've got my application brushes, my number 2s, and then I've got a couple of these small fan brushes as my blending brush. I tend to wet it once and try to dry it as much as I can on the blending brush. I want it, I mean, if I wipe my hand, I should just see a hint of thinner. That's the trick. Really, when a lot of you guys try to do this for the first couple times, until you have that magical moment where it just kind of goes, aha, the drier the blending brush is, the better success you're going to have with this process. So you really don't want too much thinner. It's just enough to move the oil paint around a little bit. And the beauty of this process, why we do the cardboard palette and all that kind of stuff, and if it's not working right away, again, it's just a continuation of wetting it and drying it. And you can get into a rhythm, you can get going pretty quickly with this stuff. And I'm just trying to blend this out a little bit. Kind of a cloud pattern. I do a little stippling. This tapping motion is very effective for horizontal surfaces, because I'm trying to just spread that green out a little bit more, trying to blend it out a little bit more, so there's really no hard edges. And you've noticed I didn't start with a pin wash. I went right into color. So I'm changing some of the patterns I'm doing a little bit too. In other words, normally we would do this stage, we'd start putting a wash on this model now. Well, I'm actually not. I'm going to work that in as I go. And it's a little bit of a different twist, and I won't talk too much about it here because it'll really start to get complicated fast. But what I try to do now is, if I've got an area where I normally would put a wash, I can do that with the oils and control it. And I can do it one section at a time versus applying a pin wash to the whole thing like we traditionally would do. So that's kind of a change. I'm not going to get into too much, but you'll see me apply some colors here, and you'll realize kind of you can get a different refined look to it. And it's just there's no right or wrong with that. It's just something I've been trying to do lately, a little bit differently. So versus coming in and doing a wash on the whole model, and then doing the oil paints on the whole model, and then doing the pigments on the whole model. The pigments I still do in one step, but now with the oil paints, I can, at each section, do every effect I want to do in that one section, and then move on to the next section. And that's kind of a different way to work. I've actually talked about this with aircraft. I had a seminar with aircraft guys specifically about that, because I think what can happen now is you can start paneling out your aircrafts a little bit differently and getting away from the quilted looks and the airbrush post shading look, and you can start controlling the wash on a wing in a certain way, and the fading of the paint on that certain wing. You can control it all in that section instead of doing the whole thing at once. And I know that's intuitive. You're like, well, why not do the whole damn thing? You're like, what are you doing? Well, the reason is because when you start studying photographs and you start studying the real things, the right wing's not going to be the same as the left wing. And now when it's on the competition table, guys are going, dude, that's pretty nice. What do you got going on here? You got a little subtle shift. So now you start moving your stuff away from the right side is the same as the left. The symmetry of artistic stuff. Now you've incorporated an artistic element to it, but in a controlled and realistic manner. So the oil paints to me have really elevated that conversation in my head, and now I'm starting to spew it out to you guys a little bit. So, and again, it's not like you have to do it this way, but if you try it that way, you can come up with some different, some interesting things.
Question about colors. Do you start with the lights and go to the dark?
You can, yeah. Typically, they do tend to work better. Traditional conversation is light to dark. That conversation gets reduced by the less thinner you use. So if you're going to use a lot of thinner, you end up using a lot of thinner, light to dark makes a little bit better sense, because by the time you start applying your dark colors and thinning them, blending them, you're washing some of the other stuff away. But if you use less thinner and less thinner and less thinner, you can work with colors kind of one color at a time without affecting stuff too much. You will always have a little bit of the meshing of the tones. And you want that on some levels. Like I can come in here, I can switch up from my green. I've got the green in here. I can apply, that brush sucks. I can come in here with this, okay, just real quick. You can kind of see the oil coming out of the cardboard. That's what you want. You want that kind of dark section. Takes 15, 20 minutes to really, and some of them are juicier than others. Some colors, they're all a little bit different. That's what you want. That's what you're looking for. That means you're ready to go. So I'm going to come in here, to your question, I'm going to come in here and I went kind of with the greens first. So I'm going to come in here and, and paper cups with thinner doesn't work, Mike. Remember that. Yeah, it just bled right out. Smart move.
Gotta get some other cups.
No, it's okay.
I think I have some cups down there.
Okay, so. And the reason I'm talking about that, where I'm doing all the different steps at one time, is like I said, it comes down to, if you start getting in the idea of always using the same order of things and the same process and your every model, what happens? And maybe because I do so many, maybe that's why this has happened. But they do start to look the same. They do start to feel the same. Your motivation for it, your enthusiasm for the model, can wane because you just keep using the same process, same colors over. And to me, that defeats the purpose. And I personally felt what I was doing was, now if I just start reducing my work section on the model down a little bit and start applying all the various stuff to it in this one area, I can do something special here. I can do something less intense over here. I can just control it in a different manner, and you're going to get a slightly different result. And I think that's one thing that's kind of, if we're all looking at where we're evolving to, it was kind of a new thing for me to happen a little bit, where I can kind of, I did it on the AMX30 is probably the most recent example of that, where each thing I treated the turret completely differently than when I treated the hull. I didn't pin wash the whole thing at once. And I didn't fade the greens and the browns at one time all the same way. I went in and I was doing different things at different stages at different times. And to me, that was a difference in and of itself. Because when you read all the magazine articles over and over again, it's the same, you can put them down to like 5 groups of articles and here you go, it's going to be the same conversation. And so I'm really trying to okay, well, how do we break out of that? How do we get something that's going to be a little bit different? And that was kind of where I was starting to go with it. And the oils can really do that in a nice way.
It's better.
What's that? Oh, yeah, I pulled one of your caps out. Yeah, that's fine. Thanks. Thank you, Edward. All right. It's almost 2 o'clock. And again, if I want something to be runnier and more of a thin wash that has the capillary action and stuff, you just wet the brush a little bit more. So you start, again, it's all about control. So if I've got some oil color on it and I want it to be a little bit more of a traditional wash, then I want to hit these bolts and have it, do its thing. But you're gonna have more thinner on the model, so you do have to remember to work in certain ways. See, right now I'm gonna have to fight tide marks a little bit. I'm trying to put some wash in a more traditional sense in the panel lines here, but that's okay.
What about all those discussions about having shading surface? Do you get easy capillary action? You don't care.
Because I'm working so small of a section, and then again, it goes back to the conversation where I'm like, okay, if I was going to pin wash the whole thing, if your matte paint is sprayed really nicely and smooth, I don't personally feel you need to put a satin varnish on, or even a gloss varnish, to achieve the effect you're trying to achieve. And again, that goes against the grain of what we've been told and what we've been taught, and kind of those things. It does, if you're doing aircraft and it's a 30-second thing, like that Corsair downstairs, and it's just, you got these beautiful panel lines, and yeah, you might have an easier time with it. But if I'm going to come in and control it, I'm applying so little liquid. I think you're going to have, I personally have felt, I stay out of those conversations a little bit, I don't really get into it too much online, because it just becomes an argument. But I can control the quantity by the refinement of the brush, how much I'm putting down, and then getting into it. And the other thing too is, when we start doing things in the process order of things, and with varnishes and stuff, it becomes very rigid, I feel. And when you look at the real things a lot, they're not rigidly, that panel line might have opacity shifts all the way through it, and in and of itself. So I'm trying to control and get more variety in this to get a little bit more realistic and a little bit more separated from the other models on the table. That's kind of that other conversation, kind of, instead of doing one pin wash and then doing all these other effects and then coming back and adding a little bit more, which I've done for years. Now I'm kind of coming in and right away, I'm already starting to create different effects up front. What I like about that is I get excited about what I'm starting to see. Like I like what's going on here. So that makes me enthusiastic to keep going on this thing. Because these, as we know, these will grind on, and we, building these big projects. And I think coming up with more easier, simpler, efficient, less stressful ways to do things for what we do is helpful for the general conversation, I feel. So it's not, and I don't look at it right or wrong. I don't go into like, I'm right about this, and no, I don't care about that. It's just something I've been working on, and if you guys want to try it that way, I think you can come up with some cool things, and that's kind of how I look at it. So, but as I continue on here, and not to say I haven't used varnishes, I do use them. It's just not a constant process. And I'm just kissing the surface. I've got a little bit of oil down. I'm going around some bolts here, and it's kind of, this is kind of the pin wash stage a little bit. Just dirtying some things up. And because of this model in particular, for example, this is, let's just call it agricultural for a convert. This is not a military, but there's going to be some dust coming up on here on this platform. Like I know intuitively, okay, the tracks are going to come up, so there's going to be some dirt and dust and the guy stepping on it. So I know in my head where I'm trying to go with this a little bit already. And I try to, whenever possible, is to have a couple pictures at hand. And it can just be a related piece. It doesn't have to be, if I'm working on a Panther and this Panzer IV has the better effect I'm looking for, I don't care. I don't get too worked up about that. It's great to have the picture of what you're trying to do, but at the same time, if something is scratched and chipped the way you kind of want it applied to it, I'll use that effect. Mix 2 or 3 different photos from two or three different vehicles into something, that's fine. So this really refined approach has kind of changed how I go about things. For example, this little T-34 demo model, when you come up and look later, I did the whole section all the way through to pigments. And that was kind of a nice thing to do. And I can continue that on and go all the way around. And I just find that it's just kind of a new way to do it. And it just was a little bit more exciting, a little bit different. It just kind of came out a little bit different result. Sometimes a happy accident will come of it, and you'll get some cool things out of it.
Do you feel that you have like a goal before you start painting the model, or does the process?
Usually I do. I try to, all the research, all the reference, all that stuff, I do attack it, get into it, figure it out, where am I going with it. Especially the more common subjects, if it's Tigers and Panthers and T-34s, there's just a lot of them being done, and I want to kind of target what I'm going to do with it. And that affects my construction. And like the T-72 was a classic one. I had a couple series of photos that came on Missing Links from 10 years ago. Depot hacks out of Chechnya, and I was like, cool. Never got around to doing it, but I've always had the photos. And so when I finally got to it, that reference level, and this is how we all typically probably would work a little bit, but I did have a really good idea what I was doing with this. I got the main kit, had no idea what to do with a French 1960s tank at all. Just had, I mean, there's just nothing out there for it. But there's a French site, Charge Francois something, whatever it was. They list all their battle tanks out, and this was a collection of photos from each generation of tank that they've got. It was a great site. You guys, a lot of you guys, if you're into French armor, are probably familiar with it. But they had some AMX 30s that had been on the depot for 20 years, and that was the game. You know, again, it just, I knew what I had to do. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew the hairspray would give me the chipping of the flake paint that we're showing in the photos, and so now I've worked my path out. You know, and then the model itself had everything removed, so all the tools were off. I had to get the brackets. So that whole thing is how I tend to work mostly. Trying to work this tractor here just off the cuff is actually a little bit harder. I could use a couple really nice, good reference photos right now to see what I want to do with it. But at the end of the day, you know, it's a little bit of both. You know, you kind of come and go with it.
So you work sections for sections.
Mm-hmm.
If you have one surface, do you work on this as one section, or could you split this surface?
Well, like, okay, so for this example here, I would, if I was to continue on, I would work this whole little part of the platform, you know, right here. I'd work this all out and kind of get
one section.
Yeah, I'd get everything up to pigments and up to maybe the graphite for the metal part. You know, I'd get everything up to that done. So I get all my coloring done, and this would presume too. I would, if I was going to do markings and anything like that, I'd already do that now.
But if you take an airplane,
Mm-hmm.
you take panel for panel.
You can do it panel for panel, or like I would probably do like the wing per wing.
Okay.
And then on the 72nd and 48, it's a lot easier. In the 30 seconds, when I've been kind of starting to practice a little bit, I've done some demos with it. You know, like they're just big for me. You know, transitioning from this size up to like a Mustang in 32nd and that whole fuselage, you might get the nose done as one group of area, and then work it out. Because what you're going to want to do, and that's a great example, is that engine section of a fighter is going to be completely different than the end of the tail section. So by not applying the same technique all the way through the thing, now you can control the nose of an aircraft to get it where you want. And you especially, you know, World War II stuff especially, you know, where you just got the maintenance, the desperation aspects. You know, they're flying 10 sorties a day. You know, the thing's just going to get messed up. The back of the tail underneath and some of this other stuff will definitely not be that way. So you can control that by working this out. And that also is, like I said before, because this is such a long, involved thing, I'm actually trying not to model in a day. Like, that's not my goal. So if I do this side, I know I've got a map for when I come back and do the other side. I've got a shot at it without getting too hung up on this, that, or the next. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of, okay, you spend a weekend doing that one side. Nice. Now I can breathe a little bit. I've got it done. Relax, hit the other sections. And you're going to be in a better mood because you've got your guide, and then you can pull it through. So, and then with the chipping, say, you know, around the cockpit, you're going to have chipping, you know, and it'll be metal, aluminum underneath, maybe a zinc chromate popping through a little bit on the wing roots and on the frame and on the canopies and stuff, and that'll all be there already, so you can come back in and do it. But if you do the oils, you can definitely transition. And it's a control thing, and maybe because I'm just a control freak, so it's just kind of, I want to control it all the way through, so that I know I've got that. And I think when the aircraft stuff does happen, I'm excited about it because I want to express that. You know, I want to show guys like, hey, this is another way to do it, or this is another idea, and it kind of breaks you out of, you know, putting the sludge wash or whatever they call it, all those other things on the aircraft, and then wiping it all away in one thing, so that your aircraft has the same panel lines everywhere. And it's common. It's how we've been doing it for decades, and I get it. That's fine. I'm not trying to argue that point, but I think, okay, well, wait a minute. If we do this, and if we look at this photo over here, you know, and there's some great pictures now. You know, there's been some time life color photos from World War II that have come out in the last 5 years or so, and I mean, just glorious stuff from World War II. That's just, now we can see it, and it's not black and white. We can see where the greasy handprints of the mechanics who are living in a hut in the Aleutian Islands with no running water, he can't wash himself. When he's touching that thing, it's just getting messy. And even from the factory photos, we've seen stuff where, you know, P-40 factories out of LA at 1941, the aircraft coming off the factory line, by the end of the day, those assemblers are a mess. That matte paint gets just greasy, and just stuff is already happening. So I think this is kind of the excitement of this whole thing was, now I can get that now, because that's what I obsess about. I think we all kind of, when you look at that picture, you're like, how the fuck does that happen? And you're just like, all right, and you got to break it down backwards a little bit. How do I do this? And
That's the big question.
yeah, and so I think the refinement, the tools, the precision, that's actually really what I want to get to you guys is the precision, that level of refinement is. Look, I've got a couple tubes of oil paint. I'm slapping down some color. I've used browns and greens. I mean, the simplistic matter of it, it's keep it easy, keep it simple, and it tends to really. I'm not doing anything magical. I'm not really. There's no sorcery over here. There's no. And I try to convey that to you guys because I don't want to intimidate anybody. Miguel comes walking in the room. We're all going to be intimidated, right? I mean, it's going to be that, and I don't want it to be that. I want you guys to understand. Okay, well, all Mike's got, he's got a little sharp brush. Pretty good quality brush. He's got some oil paints, some thinner, and he's just kind of taking his time, and I'm just putting down a little bit of color. Not that I'm talking in the third person, but I'm just coming in here, just put a little bit of color. I got another brush, and my friends, that is it. That is the gist of the matter. It should be a 5-minute demo. You know what I mean? It should be. That's it. And that's really what I want to get across. Is the power and the simplicity, the efficiency, and these oils are, nice thing about the oils is I can talk for 10 minutes and come back and do a little bit of work, but because of this cardboard thing, this whole process, these things will a little bit of hair dryer, light this up a little bit. I can push on. If I had to be that guy where, okay, shit, the contest is coming up, I've got 2 weeks, if I had to be that and do that, and it seems to be every model, actually, never gets away from that, does it? I'm gonna want to have at it and be efficient and fast. I can really start to crank. I can really start to push myself hard and really get going. But the best part is I've only got a couple brushes, a little bit of oil, so I'm not going to ruin it. I just keep it all refined, all controlled, just keep pushing myself. And it's just long hours at the desk a little bit. Your back kind of suffers, and the dog wonders why I'm not paying attention to it. But other than that, I mean, I'm not doing anything differently, and that's really important. And I'm bummed I didn't get further with this, but we can keep playing with it. I know, Alex, how are we doing? We're at 2:10, 10 after 2.
Yep.
You guys okay? Okay, good. Let me do a little bit. I'm going to put some lighter colors in this thing. Let's see. Where did that bottle go? And the other thing too is I'll be moving into a lot of the other genres. In general, science fiction. All this stuff translates quite easily, quite well. You just have to get used to the canvas that you're working on. The aircraft canvas can be the most daunting, especially as 30 seconds now popular. They do take a lot of time to do this on a 30-second aircraft. Does take quite a bit of time, realistically. I mean, it could take you, a weekend to do a section of the nose like that, and it could take you, 2 to 3 weeks of doing that to get a whole, and then underneath and all that. I mean, it can take a while, and that's some guys. They'll flip to the air. That's one of the reasons we just slop the shit on and keep going, because it does take time. So, I admit that part of it. However, I'm sticking to my guns, and I'm just going to see it through to the end. See how it goes. And the other thing is you can combine techniques too. This is all traditional stuff. Can all be. I'm not doing anything new, really, to be honest with you. I'm not trying to claim anything. This is some brand new thing. It's just I'm just working with the same stuff we had in a slightly different manner, slightly different process. I'm twisting it around a little bit and seeing what I can come up with, and that's all I'm really kind of doing at the end of the day. And that takes stress off of me, because I'm not trying to sell anything other than the fact that it's an educational thing for the books, and that takes a lot of pressure off of me too. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of dust work as well. So I've got kind of a little bit of transition of green in here. I've got a little bit of the dark wash. So when you do a dust thing with oils, you can actually go a little bit wetter. The lighter colors tend to operate a little bit better with a little bit more thinner. They will stain the paint. You have to work a little bit faster. And this is a light on a dark, so this is kind of a little bit opposite of sometimes you'd put the dust on first. The beauty of that conversation, though, is I can do the dark I can put a dark panel wash in here. I can go back with some light dust oils, and then I can reverse it after it's dry if I want to, and add a little bit more. I can come back and I can keep, because you're going to have that problem. You're going to go, okay, well that didn't work out quite what I was hoping for, so I can come back and do that. And that's another reason why I kind of, to be honest with you guys, that's another reason I kind of like that, because I tend to think I'm a lot smarter than I am. A lot of guys do that, I know, but you know, I want to do a certain thing, and I kind of start into it, and it's not doing what I want it to do at all. And that's the nature of the business. So one reason I like to work with stuff that's fairly forgiving. This would be a lot harder in the acrylic wash world, and that conversation of acrylics and some of those other ideas. But basically, I've got what I think will be a really nice little. And well, I tend to bounce around. Sorry. It's very, very true that you can get on many projects 75, 80, 90% of the way through, and you're just like, damn it, this is not. It's not happening. You must be disciplined. It's the whole grasshopper thing. Like, you've got to be disciplined into the final stages, and that's the last 5% of stuff. Can really make all the difference in the world. One thing though that I found with this kind of working the whole section at one time is you can kind of see the results of things earlier in the process. In other words, if you're traditionally doing things as one whole thing at one step at a time, like you'll put a wash on this thing and then leave it for a week, you'll come back like, whatever, you know, okay. Working the whole section out a little bit, you can kind of get to the end result and see where it's going to all be. And that's kind of like a little bit, and excuse me here, but it's a little bit like porn. You get to the money shot, like you can see the thing, you're like, all right, now I'm really happy with that. And I know now I can go through the whole model, and I can know where I'm going to end up. And that kind of, to me, in the way I'm kind of thinking about things, is like, all right, that's cool. That's awesome. I love that. So now I come back in a month, or, you know, if I'm working on this for the next 2 weeks, I know where I'm going with this. And then taking the guesswork out of it is kind of a nice thing now. It was kind of, okay, now I don't have to wait till the very end to really see it. So that's kind of a newer idea, so to speak. So that's, and the other thing, guys, while we're talking, is this thing's almost dry. Like, I don't have to wait 24 hours. I'm not going to do a whole lot more as I'm going to come back and put some pigments on this thing, but I'm not going to. And all I've done is I've just added a little bit of light green tones, a little bit of dust color in there. And again, no need to wait for this stuff. You guys can pass that around. So you can see right then and there, even in 10, 15 minutes of talking to you, you know, I'm not on my A game right now, but happy with, I mixed a little green, I mixed a little yellow, some of the buff color in it, got kind of a lighter. And you can see how that's already, without traditional methods or processes of doing things in the order we're used to. I've got that little section right there, 75, 80, 90%, and you can compare it to the side that's not touched. And that's it. I mean, and I think the simplicity of that is a powerful thing. It makes my life a lot easier, to be honest with you. You know, on a professional level, when you're working the deadlines and you're, the last thing you want to be is stressed out because you got to get this shit done. You know, and I think maybe it's changing city. I don't know. I moved a couple years ago, but I mean, I think just ultimately. Being a lot less stressed out about this stuff on a professional level. You know, if you guys are thinking, well, okay, I get to do this for a living, all that kind of stuff, it becomes work fast. It becomes a lot of work fast. You know, the relentless kit output we're seeing, you know, the Chinese are just not helping. Just killing us with it. And it's beautiful stuff. I mean, the main vendor downstairs, that kit wall he's got up is almost all new kits. I mean, the last 6 months, they're almost all new kits. What the hell are we going to do with all this stuff? And so I think to myself, okay, well, that's just like, you know, like the new Tamiya, you know, Samo came out. I'm like, beautiful. I can't wait to get it. I'm not doing French armor for 2 years. I know that. I can't touch it. So I have to be that guy where, like, I don't have the stash. There's not 1,000 kits in my house. Trust me. They're all gone. They're all sold. And that also again, it's like having girls in the room. Like, you just don't get distracted by that one of sitting over here going, I really want to do this one over here. But you've got to finish this guy, because that's what's coming up next. So for me, I fight those things. So I try to keep it to where I can maintain and control it. But coming up with that little thing to where I start working in a full section, I can work this whole, like this T-34 demo model, I can leave this, and this I've been working on this thing for 3 years. And it's got like 50,000 flight miles, because it's gone to Finland, it's gone to Norway now, it's back to LA, back to Portland. This little section here never changes, so I can always come back to this model and keep working it and get that same effect and all that, you know. So that conversation that's a game changer for me, and that's kind of where I got to where, okay, if I've got to work on this guy over here, World War II German, and now I got to switch over here to the 1990s Russian, you know, and then I got to go to 60s French. So I'm that guy. I have to deal with it. Some of you are lucky. You're only doing 1 or 2 things, and that's cool. But I had to come up with something that worked for me. I have to become sustainable, efficient, and how do I do it? And it was kind of that whole thing with the oils and working, you know, the one section at a time. And I can let that model sit for a month, 2 months, 2 years. I can come back to that tractor, and I can spend 2 weeks on it and just, you know, make it sing, but it's all the work's already done. The hard work's already done. So.
Like, how do you do about markings and chipping?
I try to use the paint mask as much as I can. So guys like Alex are my best friend. You know, I try not to use decals as the least amount. Probably the dry transfers in between, because you can chip them with a knife a little bit, and it's probably going to be a different conversation when I get into aircraft heavily. And getting into all those things, like if I was to do an F4 Phantom, it's got stencils galore, you know, and okay, well, yeah, it's a varnish, it's a decal session, it's the classics. But then I can start to tweak it with the oils and get into those things I just talked about. So I haven't quite got into that hard, and I know it's coming up, because that's going to be, all the aircraft guys are going to be going, what the fuck just happened? And when we get to that conversation, and I've got to make sure that I've got, you know, like the T-34 turret has decals on it, this particular one. They don't fit the scheme that I've done, because I've worn everything else out, but the markings are perfect. And that's the pisser of decals. It's just, they're so hard to get that level of, you know, Alex, if you need an idea, make decals that are already chipped and worn out. If you haven't thought of it already.
You got a veteran decal that has a lot of rusty streaks.
The train guys already have them. There's the, like, actual companies for the train guys that are rust streaks. You know, you just lay decals over this boxcars in a certain scale, and the whole thing's rusted out. So yeah, that masks, or I try to use spray masks and paint masks as much as I can. These little test samples are all paint masks on here. So it's a mask for the disc camo, it's a mask for the markings, it's a mask for the number, all the way through. So yeah, I'm just not a decal fan, and it just happens to be because everything I do is worn out. You know, I don't have, this is the world I live in, so it's okay. There's going to be ways, and you can paint chips into a decal. You can, I mean, there's different things you can do. I mean, technically you can do. It'll happen. So I can keep going, or we can cut it off and
I think
let Alex go. 2:20?
Alex,
Yeah.
in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Så har du någon fler spørsmål fra?
Yeah.
Mike, what about this? It's kind of going back to Tank Art 1 book,
Mhm.
Tiger article. You're talking.
Oh yes, let me work that. Okay, the T-34 actually has some on it. Thank you, Roman. Okay, so to transition real quick, what Roman was asking about was.
No, I'm not talking about lacquer chipping.
Oh, you're not?
No,
Oh,
because lacquer chipping, I mean, it's.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
For me, it's a closed topic. I know how to do it.
Okay, cool. I can still show it if anybody wants to see it. But.
Yeah. So when you were talking about fine dust layer and spraying the fixer with airbrush.
Yes. You want to see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I tried to.
5 minutes.
All right. No, that's easy.
Couple-
That's no
couple of
problem.
times, but then
Okay.
I get exactly into the problem that you described. That you kind of basically, the pressure kind of is.
Yeah.
Everything is gone.
Okay. Give me 5 minutes here. I will do about a minute or two prep. Clean this up real quick. So what Roman's asking about with pigments in particular, and I discussed it in the second book specifically, in the Allied book. You want kind of that. Actually, I'll use that model. when you get to the point where, especially on horizontal surfaces, and we see this a lot when you start looking at vehicles, in particular with military vehicles that have a matte paint job, that thin layer of dust that happens on the top of the turrets, on the top of the decks, where the tank or the vehicle's constantly moving and it's getting the dust thrown back up onto it, and it's just this light little splattering of dust. And then you get shit coming down on top of it, you know, whether it's the crew, whether it's rain, and it gets kind of a gritty, dusty kind of a thing. You really, to get that through pigments, is kind of where I come back to this little idea I came up with, where studying Mig's work in particular, how he applied the pigments to the model and applied the liquid thinners that he was using, the fixtures. And I just call fixtures now the whole group of things. I don't even get into it. That was really kind of one of those things where switching to an airbrush, because you can make an airbrush kind of spit a little bit in the ways we don't want it to work right. You can actually get it to work for you in that sense. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down just a thin layer of pigments, and I've got, where did I just put it here? This guy. So quickly, pigments, I just put these little 35 mil film canisters. I take 4 or 5 colors in the general range of colors. So I've got a light mix, beach sand, and you know, they have all their names that they use on them now. I just put it all in here and shake it up. It's just like paint. It's actually all it is just dried up pigment. So I have a light, I've got a medium and a dark. I'll just use a light one for right now. I try not to use pigments as a single color source. So in other words, I don't use one color pigment and that's it. That's why I switched to this, where I've got 4 or 5 colors in this, and that basically replicates. Actually, you can see when you get up closer to the T72 and the AMX30, down on the hole sides there, you see some of the varieties of colors that just really transition in there, and it's subtle. It's very subtle, but it's because I've pre-mixed them. All the hard work is done already, and that's one reason I kind of like them. So to do that process. And it's also an efficient way. This thing's gonna need a good cleaning. Sorry, Edward.
I got another one.
No, it's fine.
Wait for compressor, right? Wait for compressor.
Yeah, I have one of these similar setups at home, and if you do start airbrushing a lot and getting the air tank compressors, highly recommend. Worth the money. I've got my Iwata one for 10 years now, and never broke, never a problem, and yeah.
I was lucky. I paid 500 Norwegian kroners for that one.
Wow.
Okay.
Was that $40?
Something like that, yeah.
Fuck.
It was used 5 times before the guy sold it.
Well, that's like buying the classic car, the vintage stuff, and the old lady drove it, you know. You got a deal. A little bit of a mess on there. Okay, I'm trying to hurry here, but yeah, I was going to say is just quickly on tools. I don't skimp on the airbrush. It's worth a good compressor. It's worth a good airbrush. I have 2, you know, and I discovered when I was using just one airbrush for everything, I was having problems. Things were happening with one airbrush. In other words, if I was spraying a life color and then I was spraying a Tamiya and then I was spraying a Vallejo over a course of time, just the airbrush doesn't work right. No matter how much you clean, it just. So I started to buy an airbrush just for brand of paint. I got to the point where I've just got a vinyl acrylic airbrush, and I only put through Vallejo and Life Color, and I only put through their chemicals. If I do Tamiya, then that's the one that gets cleans with the lacquer thinner, and that airbrush just tends to work great. I don't put the Vallejos back into the Tamiya airbrush, kind of a thing. That was another little kind of a switch in my, because I'd spend half my day cleaning stuff. You know, you paint so much and you're just cleaning so much, and it just wasn't working right. So, okay, so the airbrush is set. So X28 thinner, Tamiya, it's my primary fixer for pigments in this application in particular. I save the heavy pigment fixers from AK and MIG and all those guys. I save those for the heavy mud work on the sides, but if this dust process thing here, the X20A is what I use most of the time. So let's see. Pigments. With pigments, actually almost every time I apply the pigment dry and then I add a fixer to it. That's how I tend to do it. So I've got my mixture here. Now I'm doing a dust layer, so I kind of there's not a lot of pigment on this, so I'm just trying to keep it. And this is purely just to show you guys the technique. So I'm going to kind of put the dust in the cracks in the corners where it's going to collect a lot. And you will get some pigment dust, and it's not a lot. In a stippling motion. And I'm looking already to get it kind of gritty. I'm kind of tapping this. Coffee, you get the little jittery hand, that's actually a benefit. So I've just applied oops, sorry guys. So I've just applied a real light thin layer of dust, straight, neat onto the model. Nothing, no varnish, no nothing. You have to have a matte surface. So it's for the military guys, it's easier because we use a lot of matte paints out of the gate. Makes our life a lot easier with the pigments. Okay, so I apply the pigment dry. Let's get a little bit of X20, it's just straight up thinner in the airbrush, no big deal. Okay. Pressure's a little bit high, but that's not a big deal. Okay, for this idea. So what I'm going to do now is I need to fix this pigment onto the surface so that it's going to stay there, pretty much. So what I'm trying to do, because I want a dust layer. This is not for mud or anything like that. Start off about yay far away. Just kind of, okay, I got a little bit of pressure. I got to start off a little bit. So I'm just, I work the airbrush in closer, and you'll start to see as it gets a little bit wetter, and this is drying almost immediately. So this is a really fast technique. It's a really quick technique for dust. That first one will kind of, I've diffused most of it. A lot of the pigments are kind of gone right now. And on the M3 Lee that's actually in that book, there's 5 or 6 layers going on in that. So this keeps going. So I come back in. And I just repeat it. I concentrate the dust in the corners and around details where it's going to collect a little bit more in a natural sense. I don't heavily apply it. I'm just tapping a little bit more dust onto it. And if you turn your airbrush pressure way down to like say 5, 6 psi, under 10 psi, anything like that, and get it kind of to spit and stutter, you get a couple drops and things in there, and it'll really give you a nice.
But is the layer of pigment matters? Like you have to be really careful with a very fine layer.
I'm just applying it really thin. That's why it takes 5 to 6. I mean, you could try to push it and try to get more opacity quicker.
No, but if you put more, you just remove everything.
Lose the effect, yeah. Because I want the green to show. I want the green to show. So you can see. I'm just trying to spit this. You want little droplets. You want it to not be perfect. And I can, with pigments in particular, the light to dark question. I tend to almost work light to dark with pigments almost all the time. It's just a little bit easier in that sense. Actually, that medium's not much different. My medium's almost a light color. And pigments can be a little bit moody, as I'll say. You wet a pigment and it just goes immediately a color change, like oh shit, what did I just do? You have to kind of have a little bit of faith with them that they'll come back to you when they dry out. Again, the hair dryer. When you get to really wet pigments, hair dryer is definitely the most important part. So I've just put a little bit of just a little bit more of a richer tone in there in that. In certain angles of the light, it looks just like what you're looking for. If you go dead on, you barely see it, and then when you get kind of that oblique angle, the light, you get a real nice. And you can, I'll pass this around. You can kind of, you have to move it around and see how the light shifts, and that's, we see that in photos all day long. You know, it's depending on the lighting and the conditions, and a top of a turret might be dusty, and then the light's real low, and it looks like it's white. It looks like snow camo. It gets so bright, and that's very common. Put a little bit more on here, but you can see what I'm. Does that kind of help? Yeah, that's. It's a cool little. I like it. I use it quite a bit actually. It's
Well,
quick.
I found another way to use those kind of things.
Oh, yeah?
When
Nice.
You,
Give it up. Come on.
yeah, you thin the pigment with the same Tamiya fixer, just with a cup,
Mm-hmm.
and then you use the this speckling approach.
Yes.
It would be kind of the same effect because
Mhm.
you
It is,
small
yeah.
droplets that dry and you kind of have.
That's usually what I do at the very end. So if I've done all my stuff, like on these guys here, when I get into the speckling, and I talk about it in the third one with oils. I do a lot of actually I didn't even get into it. I do that almost all the time now. Like speckling is, because I'm always looking for kind of a gritty, I want little spots and stains that, like when you look at photos of stuff and you see the vehicles up close, there's always little just specks of whatever. And in this case, you're using a thin pigment, like a thin dust, and then you're kind of spitting it down onto it. When I speckle, there's various ways to do it, and sometimes you can use a toothbrush and spray the bristles. Sometimes guys will use the airbrush and spray the bristles. So the way I've kind of, again, I'm a control freak, so I'll use the oil. Oh, let's see here. Where's my little cap? Okay. Like a wash, I'll kind of make kind of a wet. Okay, and I'll do this right into the pigments, and there's variation. You can do this at any level. You can do it with the pigments, and speckling's a really nice little technique to pick up on. It's kind of a newer idea that we're starting to talk about, even though we've been doing it a while, I think. So if I've already, and again, this is the lovely part of all this stuff, is I can come in. I love this part. This just looks exactly like what I'm looking for too. I can just imagine the just stains and just whatever getting specked up into the dust, and the first thing a vehicle gets is dirty. It gets dusty out of the factory. It goes right on the test track. It gets dusty and dirty. So then it gets washed, and then it gets dusty and dirty again, and just doing this idea back and forth is. Pass that around. So you can see on the other side, on the dust side now, and that's the point. The fact that he's got to put his glasses on to see what that's key. You want that, because the way I look at a model, from here, I'm a meter away from these things. Okay, I like what I see on the table, and as I get closer and closer and closer, I'm starting to show you more and more and more.